Part 2 of our NFC East opponent preview is brought to you by MyBookie. Summer is the best time of year. We're talking vacation, the beach, lots of sun, and of course, sports. Now, whether you like MLB, MMA, golf, or anything else, MyBookie is the place to bet. Their mobile site is easy to use and allows you to make bets from anywhere. No hassle, no waiting line, no need to get off the couch. And just because the NHL and NBA are done doing their thing doesn't mean that there's nothing else to do. We got the Women's World Cup going on right now. Maybe you want to put a bet on the on USA women to see if they'll score 1,000 goals before it's done. I mean, they put 13 up on Thailand the other day, so they're probably good for that 1,000. But maybe you want to drop a futures bet on next year's NBA champ or get back your favorite player for Heisman Trophy. Just visit mybookie.ag today to get started. Then try your luck at outsmarting the odds makers. But wait, if you deposit with promo code BEARS100, MyBookie will give you a 50% deposit bonus. That's promo code BEARS100. At MyBookie, you play, you win, you get paid. Part 2 of our NFC East opponent preview is also brought to you by SeatGeek. Let SeatGeek take the confusion out of your ticket buying experience. Instead of shopping dozens of sites to find the best deal, let SeatGeek do the work for you. Their app scans the web for best deals to your favorite game, concert, or show and rates them on a scale of 0 to 10 to let you know if you're getting the best bang for your buck. A green dot marks great deals, a yellow dot good deals, and a red dot not so good deals. Use promo code ACAA at checkout to receive $20 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? That's promo code ACAA for $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. My guest today is Ian Cummings from the Riggo's Rag site for Fansided.com and the Riggo's Rag podcast. It is a tongue twister. Riggo's Rag podcast. And I had an outstanding time talking to Ian. We're actually just going to go right into the interview when I get done with the intro here because, well, for starters, Ian and I talked for a very long time. For anyone who peeped how long the episode was before they got started, you should probably be comfortable or hope you don't have anything to do for a while because Ian and I talked Redskins for quite a bit. So hopefully, you guys will enjoy the conversation. And, no news and notes or anything like that to report for the moment. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. Part 2 of our NFC East preview about the Washington Redskins with Ian Cummings from Riggo's Rag. Part 2 of our journey through the NFC East takes us out east to the nation's capital, home of the Washington Redskins. And here to help us preview the 2019 Washington Redskins from Fansided.com's Riggo's Rag and Riggo's Rag, that's a tongue twister, Riggo's Rag podcast, Ian Cummings. Ian, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, a lot of G's in there. You'll get used to it.
Lots of them in there, yeah. So first question that I like to ask all of my new friends, if you will, we first ask, A, where are you from? B, where are you now? Because ever since I started doing these interviews, the person actually being in the market their team represents is the exception, not the rule. Like my Broncos gal, she lives in South Carolina. My Saints guy lives in Los Angeles, so on and so forth. So, and then the third question being your favorite memory as a fan of the Redskins.
Okay, yeah, well, that's an interesting – I am the exception again.
Okay.
So nothing changing there. I'm from Michigan, actually, and I'm actually kind of a half Skins Lions fan. I was originally a Lions fan. You remember Kirk Cousins, Michigan State? I followed him to Washington because he was my favorite college player. Growing up, I was always a huge fan of him and kind of idolized him a little bit. And then when he became the starter, I was like freaking out back in 2015. And I started writing for Riggo's Rag, and then Kirk Cousins left, and it's kind of like, well, what do I do now? Just keep writing,
Right.
At that point, I've been following the team for a little bit, so you get to know them a little bit. You get to know the storylines and everything, so you're kind of ingrained into that culture. So I just kept writing for them. My favorite memory has to be the Code Red game, Tampa Bay, 2015, when the Skins were 2-4, and it looked like things were gonna fall apart. And then Kirk Cousins came back and an epic comeback. I think they came back from like 24-0 and won it. And of course, that sparked his emergence, and he became kind of the is he a franchise quarterback? Is he not? Now he's one of the highest paid quarterbacks for the Vikings. So that was my favorite memory. But it's been interesting watching this team over the past few years because their highs are very high and their lows are very low. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do this year. You never can know. You never can tell.
Yeah, well, let's dig into that because we were talking just briefly here before we got started, and I was looking at 2018, and I was reminded of the fact that the Redskins at the end of week 10, so we got 6-7 weeks left in the season, the Redskins were 6-3. They were leading the NFC East, or tied for the division lead at the very least, and then it all went sideways with the loss of Alex Smith, and then you lost 6 of 7 to close out the year and finish a 7-9 football team. Was that the catalyst to it all going wrong, or was there more that just kind of piled on as the year went along?
I would say it's kind of a little bit of both. It was the catalyst, but I would say the Redskins' way of winning wasn't very sustainable either. A lot of people like to throw this term around. They won ugly, all right? Ball control offense, pounding it down the middle, suffocating defense, and they weren't even perfect on the defensive side of the ball. They were winning ugly, and they were getting lucky at times. Dallas missed a field goal, could have made them 5-4. They were it was not very sustainable, kind of the old way to win football. Nowadays you have the analytics wave and, offenses trying to maximize their potential. I know Matt Nagy is a guy who kind of helped do that, kind of spark some development from Mitch Trubisky last year with the Bears. The Skins, however, last year, and part of this was due to, some injuries early on. They really needed to, kind of adapt, especially when Darius Geis went down and, Alex Smith was still adjusting through the entire season, even before he got hurt. So they erred on the efficiency side, kind of just, minimizing the mistakes. And Alex Smith has always been known for that. And it's kind of a point of contention in Washington. How good was Alex Smith really? But I'll give you this. He was a great leader, organized the team, and really just kept the offense on schedule. Not a lot of mistakes. So that was they weren't very flashy, but they didn't really beat themselves too often. And so that was the MO. But then once Alex Smith went down, you had Mark Sanchez going in there, and then Josh Johnson, who hadn't started a game since 2011. And things went downhill from there, I think is a polite way to say it. But I would say things need to change. They're not going to win the way they won in 2018 if they want to have some success in 2019. And I think Jay Gruden knows that. They've been making some changes in that regard. But they were a team that won ugly, got lucky in a few respects, but they were respectable up until Smith's injury. Then the defense kind of regressed after that, and just everything went downhill. It was really interesting.
Well, that's what I noticed when I was looking at the schedule, and I was reminded that they started out as a 6-3 football team, but looking at the schedule and just looking at the scores, it seemed to be that in the first 9 games when you went 6-3, if you held your opponent under 20, you won the game. In your 3 losses, you gave up like 24, 43 to the Saints, and then 30 to somebody else in the other loss. And then after week 10, it didn't happen again until you beat the Jaguars, and the only victory you had in the second half of the season is pretty much everybody was scoring 20 plus, and that would, if you just wanted to put it in the simplest terms, if the defense held the opponent under 20, you won the football game, because in all 6 of the games that you won, or 7 in your case, that's exactly what happened. If they scored more than 20, then they lit up the scoreboard and there was no hearing back from the Redskins. So, I mean, that would seem like what you said with the defense regressing. That statement holds if you just look at the scores themselves. They held them under 20, you won. If they scored more than 20, it was a loss almost automatically.
Yeah, and part of that was, the offense couldn't keep up.
Right.
It was in today's league, you got to be able to score at any time. There's no exceptions. You got to be able to be flexible and kind of, move the ball in any way possible. And the Redskins, their passing game it had a very low ceiling last year. And when they were relegated to the run game, they were kind of predictable. Teams could really zone in and kind of suffocate their own offensive line, and that just created a world of problems. And the offense really sputtered down the stretch. That Jaguars game, you could say that they were playing another team that played ugly in Jacksonville, and so that was kind of a someone had to win situation. not if someone deserved to win. So, yeah, it was interesting. And Greg Minuski, some people have been calling him out, the defensive coordinator, for how he used his players. There were certain situations where it felt like he wasn't showing the requisite situational awareness. Whether it's lining defensive backs up in soft coverage, on 3rd and 2, it's like, well, all they have to do is just fire a quick curl route and boom, they're across the line. So, or putting defensive ends in coverage. Ryan Kerrigan, he's one of the sack leaders of the past few years. He's been getting up there. He's almost to the century mark, but he put him in coverage a few times, and that's just, you're creating a mismatch for the offense. So, it was a combination of personnel kind of regressing. And defensive play calling, and just a lot of different factors that went into it. But one thing is for sure, it is a tale of two halves when you look at the Redskins 2018 season, and 2019 they're trying to remedy that.
Yeah, 5-3 to start, 2-6 to finish, and if you split it straight down the middle, and 8-8. And how much did injuries play into that? I mean, I know the Alex Smith injury was huge, but I know that you lost Darius Geist even before the season started. And everything like that, and then you lost one quarterback after another. When like after Alex Smith went down, you lost Colt McCoy, and then you had to go to Sanchez and Josh Johnson, to where you just were literally pulling guys off the street to play quarterback just to finish out the year.
Oh yeah, the injuries played a massive part, especially on offense. With Alex Smith, the offense was at least competent at times. Like, they did what they needed to do to put the defense in a situation to win the game. The defense was still shouldering most of the load, but at least with Alex Smith and with that offensive line, Adrian Peterson was producing well. They were at their best. Their style of football was winning. They could beat the bad teams with it, and at least compete with some good teams. But then midway through the season, you had Brandon Sheriff go down, Pro Bowl guard with a torn pectoral. You had Trent Williams battling injuries. I think he played through most of them, but he wasn't really ever at 100%. And then of course Sean Laval, he wasn't particularly effective at left guard, but just to lose him and you've got no depth there, that wasn't fun. And then when you have Mark Sanchez suiting up, and to Josh Johnson's credit, he actually had some bright moments. Whenever you have a 4th string quarterback, it's never going to be pretty. But Johnson, he did perform admirably in some respects. But when Smith's not in there, he's a guy that's been there, done that, a guy that commanded respect, and a guy that the offense really, it all came together around him. It's almost indescribable, but he was the guy who really kept things on schedule, and the uniformity of it, you could tell it wasn't always pretty, but they got the job done, and that just wasn't the case when everything fell apart. And the offensive line played a big part into that, because when the offensive line got injured, Adrian Peterson, suddenly his running style isn't as effective, and the injuries played a huge part. But let's not act like there were other factors too. And I know a lot of Skins fans are coming out and saying, we had the most players on IR out of any team over the past 2 years. That's true, but that doesn't mean you can't look at places where you could improve outside of that. And I think the Skins still have a lot of work to do. So it's not like they can fall back and say, oh, we were the most injured, which means, as long as we stay healthy, we're good to go. That's not the case, but it did play a part for sure.
Well, I mean, there is some absolute truth to the healthier you are, the better your season will most likely turn out. I mean, and I can attest to that 100%, because in 2017 and 2016, we would give the Redskins a run for their money as far as guys that finished the year on IR. And then last year we got a new training staff, a new conditioning coach, the whole 9 yards, when Matt Nagy and company came in, and we had one of the healthiest teams in football. And obviously we made some huge upgrades. We got Khalil Mack. We added like 3 or 4 receivers to give more weapons to the offense and such like. So it was kind of a perfect storm. But the fact that all of those new bodies were healthy for 99% of the season last year played a huge part in the difference between 2017 and 2018. So there is some truth to it, but you're right. Just being healthy doesn't mean you're automatically going to win football games, but it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I would have pegged them as a wild card team maybe. I think sure, Dallas, after Dallas got Amari Cooper, that offense, even when they weren't making the right play calls all the time, that offense was still humming just because you got so much talent there. I think they would have. And Cowboys defense is borderline elite. I mean, you got guys like Van Der Esch and Smith and, Byron Jones, ascending elite athletes who are just really really playing out of their mind. And I think the Cowboys would have still leapt over the Redskins, but the Skins could have certainly mounted a wild card berth. Now, what does that get you? I mean, nothing. You don't get a participation trophy, but they would have gotten a little more respect, because I know a lot of people. There was a prediction earlier today where they have the Skins going 2-14, and it's like, I'm not too high on them, but I don't see them as a bottom feeder. But if they'd made that playoff berth, maybe they'd get a little more respect now, but it doesn't mean anything. And at the end of the day, they could have been a little bit better without the injuries, but what can you do?
So we go into the off season, and the quarterback position is something that's paramount to be addressed, because who knows how long Alex Smith is going to be out. Is there a timetable for him, or it's just like 2019 is an afterthought? We're looking 2020 at best.
They still don't know if he's ever going to play again.
Wow.
So what happened, he's still got this thing called an external fixator in his leg. He had to do reconstruction surgery, because after the initial surgery, there were complications with infections and stuff. Yeah. And so that was not pretty, and they had to dig in there a few more times, and it really messed up his leg. And so they had to put an external fixator in it, which is, I don't want to go into the details, but it's complicated stuff, and he's still healing. And I think the last report I saw, I think it's like 2 months until he's got that thing off, and then he can start maybe trying to walk again. But it's going to be a long road for sure.
Yeah, you have to have the patience of a monk to go through something that. I would go insane if something like that ever happened to me. Obviously suffering the injury was horrific enough, but it's almost like the healing process after something like that is 10 times worse.
Oh, yeah, because you have all this time to get in your own head and stuff and just get down about it. And from what I've seen, Smith is in good spirits. He's staying with the team in a mental standpoint, which is good, because, he's a very respected leader. Everyone's got a ton of respect for the guy, but you just hate to see him go through that. It's tough.
So one of the things that was done by the Redskins during the free agency period, he made a trade for Case Keenum. It did not work out for him in Denver, so the Broncos acquired Joe Flacco and sent Case Keenum on his way over to Denver. You added Landon Collins, one of the bigger free agent signings in like being like marquee as far as the safeties on the market and in contract as well. Good old Dan Snyder breaking out the checkbook again. You added Eric Flowers, who was with the Giants last year and finished with Jacksonville. Re-signed Adrian Peterson and added Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie to the defensive backfield. So let's start where we obviously have to go here, and thoughts on Case Keenum coming into Washington.
Yeah, even when they got Case Keenum, I kind of knew they were going to draft a quarterback, because you look at Keenum, when he was in the perfect situation in Minnesota with that was the year their offensive line wasn't completely terrible. It was still bad, but it wasn't like Kirk Cousins bad.
Sure.
And he had a lot of weapons, a great defense. He took them to the playoffs, won a game, and very respectable quarterback. But Denver kind of regressed, and I don't think in Washington, where the supporting cast is as solid, he's a guy who can't elevate that cast. And I worded it this way in an article right after Keenum was traded for. If you want the Redskins to tank and get a high pick next year, he's not the guy to do that. If you want the Redskins to win and go to a playoff game, he's not the guy to do that either. He's kind of a middle-of-the-road guy. And so ultimately a good spot starter, a very reliable backup. If you need him to come in on a moment's notice, he can do it. He's got experience, but the arm talent, not always there. Accuracy, not always there. Just kind of a middle-of-the-road quarterback. So, and the value that they got him for kind of reflected that. It was a late-round pick swap, I think. So, and also they kind of split the salary a little bit, so he's not as costly for the team. But to me, that was always a backup move, and they're hyping it up as a quarterback competition. But I think the rookies got it in the long run. We'll see though. At the end of the day, it was insurance, and it also gave the Redskins some leverage. For potential draft trades, teams offering the Redskins like, hey, you got to trade up. You need a quarterback. They say, no, we don't. We got Case Keenum. So,
right.
You're going to have to up your offer. So that also played a part. But at the end of the day, insurance, I think some people made it more than it was. I don't see him. If he is the starter, ultimately, he won't be the starter for long, because when you invest a first rounder in a quarterback, you have to invest the time in that quarterback and give him the time to develop. And I'm sure you guys know that
Sure.
firsthand with Trubisky. So I don't see him he's kind of like a Mike Glennon to the Redskins, as Glennon was to the Bears. If he's gonna start, he's not gonna start for long.
Right. Yeah. Mike Glennon, that poor son of a bitch, man. He was doomed from the start, man. He really, really was. I mean, he came in to an impossible situation that was made even more impossible after we signed him. So I was like, we did almost nothing in the offseason that year in 2017 to improve the offense or the targets around him or anything like that. It was pretty much going to be the Jordan Howard show. This was even before we drafted Tariq Cohen. We did pick him in 2017. We didn't know he was going to work out the way he did. He was a fourth-round pick. Yeah. But he comes into that, and he's at the draft party in Soldier Field being held by the Bears. And not only did the Bears – oh, my God. Not only they draft a quarterback, they traded up to get the quarterback. So they're, just basically just pants Mike Glennon in front of the entire, fan base right there.
Yep.
When we signed a quarterback, we paid him top dollar, $16 million a season, and we go and draft a quarterback number 2 overall, gave up 4 draft picks to do it. I mean, it just felt like, Glennon was snake bit in Chicago from the jump. Like, even in his first preseason game, his first official throw as a Bear was a pick 6 against the Broncos in the preseason.
I remember that. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah, he never got it going in those first 4 games, and that 4th game was on Thursday night against Green Bay on national TV, and where the team was in open revolt after that. It's like, put Trubisky in. He's obviously the best quarterback on the team. I was dead set against it, not because I didn't want to be feeding Trubisky to the Lions. I didn't want to ruin the kid. I didn't want to, have him develop bad habits because he's running for his life or he can't do anything because he's still learning and all the rest of that stuff. Glennon was supposed to be the stopgap guy that was, protect Trubisky that first year, and then year 2 is him, kind of like Patrick Mahomes. But Glennon was so bad that we just had to hit fast forward on it all. He just never really had a shot in Chicago.
Was the money guaranteed at least?
The genius part about the contract, it was 3 years, $45 million, and only 18 of it was guaranteed. He was making 16 the first year, so it was like a $2 to $2.5 million cap hit to cut him after year 1. So Pace knew what he was doing when he signed Glennon. Yeah. So it ended up not being that big a deal. And as far as like what quarterbacks are making now, $16 million for a starting quarterback is a bargain nowadays. So. I don't have any ill will towards Glennon, or I pity him more than anything about his time in Chicago. Let's not talk about him anymore. That just depresses me. So, but your other free agent signings, you got Landon Collins to add him to the back end of the defense. You re-sign Adrian Peterson. What about the rest of your free agent crop is something that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, Collins is obviously the guy who draws the most attention. I think he was made the highest paid safety in the league by the Redskins. And, he had an All-Pro berth a couple years ago. He kind of fell off a little bit last year, but still a very good starter. A guy who fills a position in need for the Redskins. You looked at their safety situation last year; it was not all too good. I know Monte Nicholson. He was a young up-and-comer, considered that after a good rookie season. He had a rough 2018 campaign. He's trying to bounce back in 2019. We'll see if it happens. And then Clinton-Dix. I know you guys have him now, so I hope he works out for you. But he was not great for us down the stretch, and part of that is due to just miscommunication across the entire defense. But bad tackling angles was a common theme, and maybe he'll bounce back. But the Skins definitely, they wanted a change of direction, and they got it with Collins. And there's some questions surrounding Collins. Can he get back to that level he was at 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever it was? But a very good box safety, a guy who can really make his presence felt, and with judicious thunder. And you love a guy who can make plays on the ball and make an impression on the offense. And he's pretty good in coverage too. Not as good in coverage, but he's a multifaceted guy who can kind of fill all their needs. And I think playing behind that front 7, he can really make his money. So I'm excited for that one. A young player too. I think he's only 24, 25 years old still. I think 25. So, a lot of time to still grow. And working with a experienced defensive backs coach like Ray Horton, could pay dividends. I think staying with the secondary theme, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. That's a guy who played with Collins with the Giants a couple years ago, so there's some chemistry there. I don't I don't think Rogers Cromartie is a lock to make the team. And if we talk about more secondary guys later, I can go into more depth with that. But he's a guy who retired midway through the season with the Raiders, I think, and then came back this offseason with the Redskins. So obviously a few questions there. He's got great speed. He's always had great speed, a good combination of that. And I think, if they keep him, he'll be a versatile chess piece, but nothing more than a kind of a guy who only gets a few snaps a game. And then, of course, Eric Flowers. That one kind of baffled me because I think they gave him $4 million. So they're wiping out a 5th-round comp pick for that. And reports out of training camp have not been promising. They've said that Flowers looked like the worst player on the team. One guy literally said that, like word for word. He's the worst on the team. And that's rough. But I think they were trying to move him to offensive guard, trying to see if he could start there because left guard has been an area of concern for the Redskins over the past few years. So we'll see if it works out. I'm not optimistic, but yeah. And then last but not least, Adrian Peterson. Re-signing him is pretty good. I don't think he'll get nearly as many carries this year with Darius Geis coming back. I was very high on Darius Geis in my pre-draft evaluation last year. Just insane contact balance, runs with anger, and very fast and agile too. So kind of a complete back. Adrian Peterson, he's good, but you could see the old man vibes were starting to kind of resonate last year as down the stretch. He was wearing and tearing. So I think he'll be a good veteran presence for Geis and help kind of mentor him as he gets on the field and gets those reps. But I see Peterson as solid depth and nothing more. But a pretty good free agency class. Maybe they could have done more. They didn't have a ton of money to work with, but they solidified some parts of their team. Some risks I didn't think needed to be taken, like with Flowers, especially after they drafted 2 interior linemen in the draft. But Flowers does have some flexibility with tackle and guard. Maybe Bill Callahan can make something out of him. I don't know. He doesn't have a great athletic profile, but they know more than I do. They're getting paid the big bucks, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe the move to guard will help him, taking him off the island that is being the tackle, whether it be the right side or the left side. That's a one-on-one deal almost every single time. So, putting you on the inside, you've got a guy on either side of you. There's a lot more room for error, I should say. In that spot, even in the NFL. So maybe the move to guard will help him rediscover his talent, if you will. So
yeah, maybe we'll see. I think he's never been an overly physical guy at the point of the attack, so that's concerning as an interior blocker. But maybe he could work better in there. I'm hoping he can, and especially playing between guys like Trent Williams if he comes back. Some contract issues there, and then Chase Rouillet, who's one of the more underrated centers in the league. He's been pretty solid for the team. Playing between those guys could bode well for him. And then Callahan's a good offensive line coach. So if anyone can glean the best out of him, it's Callahan and maybe a few others across the league like Mike Munchak and obviously the Patriots guy who I'm blanking on his name, but Dante Scarnecchia or something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Callahan is one of the more revered offensive line coaches, and he's made good from some players like Rouillet and Sheriff and things. So if anyone can get the most out of Flowers, it's them. They took the risk, so they're confident in their abilities, but I'll believe it when I see it, basically.
So how about the guys that aren't with the team anymore? You lost, you released Zach Brown, who ended up signing with the Eagles. Preston Smith signed the Packers, so we'll see if that'll affect us in Chicago at all. Jamison Crowder goes north to the Jets, and obviously we got Clinton Dix, and hopefully that being reunited with his former backfield mate and Eddie Jackson, hopefully that will have a positive effect. He sounds over the moon to be in Chicago, so maybe just that alone, that he chose to come to Chicago as opposed to being traded to the Redskins kind of thing, maybe that can feed into some improvement for him this year. And then finally, Michael Floyd, wide receiver, went off to Baltimore. So I would wager that Brown and Smith would probably be the guys that are hurting the most that left the team.
Yeah, I think Brown and the Redskins were headed for a breakup. I think Brown mid-season actually said the writing is on the wall pertaining to his future there. And this was after an offseason in which he was just so happy to be here. I think he still had 2 more years left on his deal. So he was happy. And then when the season kind of tanked and morale dipped, Brown made some comments, and that was that. And I think his play That's a polarizing factor. I think Brown, very talented guy, occasionally got lost in coverage, and that reflected poorly because that's where a lot of the defensive, defensive, what's the word, implosions happened.
Sure.
When linebackers got lost in coverage and everything, and that was a mismatch that offenses exploited frequently. But Brown's a talented guy. I think they would miss his talents. They were obviously hoping to have Reuben Foster replace him, and then obviously he tore his ACL, so that's unfortunate. But it was a breakup that was destined to happen, and so we'll see what he does with the Eagles. I think they'll know how to use him the right way. Sometimes that was unclear with the Redskins, so whatever happens there. Preston Smith, that's a guy who is sometimes underappreciated. He only had 4.5 sacks last year, but he had a 10.5 pass rush productivity rating from Pro Football Focus. So he was getting pressure fairly consistently, and he's just one of those all-around solid guys. He's not flashy. He's still got some athletic potential that he could tap into, but he's just a solid edge defender against the run, and he can generate pressure in the passing game. And there were some sacks that were stolen from him. With the Redskins, obviously their defensive front, when you got guys like Jonathan Allen, Ryan Kerrigan, Matt Ioannidis, Daron Payne, there's not enough sacks to go around. You might impact the quarterback. You might make him step into a lane where another lineman can get him. You're not going to get credit for the sack, but you impacted the play, and you changed those spatial relationships. Preston Smith was the guy who did that very effectively, and I think with the Packers, he could kind of shine and kind of have more success statistically than he's had in the past. But not a flashy guy, but a very solid player. Clinton Dix, yeah, I think he was another guy who was kind of wanting a change of scenery, similar to Brown.
Sure.
When the entire defense was imploding, you can't blame any one player entirely for their mistakes and everything. And Clinton Dix, watching him, he did appear to have some stiffness in his hips. He's never been known to be the best athlete, but at his peak with the Packers, he was very good at making plays on the ball. Emulates Sean Taylor with his game. That was one thing that Redskins fans fawned over when he came to DC, is that he's this guy who idolizes Sean Taylor. In the back of your mind, you want to hope that he plays something like that. It wasn't entirely like that, to put it lightly. But, I think he's still got some potential to be a pretty good starter. I like Adrian Amos better, me personally. But
Sure.
I think he could be good, especially if the Bears' front seven, maintains that furor that they had last year. He could be good for them. And who was the last one? Michael Floyd. I don't think we're missing him anytime soon.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That was kind of an afterthought. I didn't even know if I should mention him. Now, before we move on to the draft, you alluded to two other things I want to talk about real quick. Even though they pretty much took place after the draft, we'll talk about it before we get to that. And you talked about the Trent Williams contract thing. And then obviously the injury with Reuben Foster is just – it's like Teddy Bridgewater all over again from what I hear. It's like another one of those non-contact injuries. He just made a false step and everything just came apart.
Yeah, it was crushing because, this was a guy who, they signed him off of waivers midseason, got a ton of flack for it. I was one of the most critical ones because when the investigation was still up in the air, I didn't want to have anything to do with it just yet. I wanted to let it play out, and they signed him obviously before he was cleared. Now, obviously, he did become cleared, and he was coming back to play with his teammates from Alabama, and he looked like he was enjoying himself, and he was really excited to get out there. And then on the first play of OTAs, he, non-contact, just took a wrong step, and bang, your 2019 season's over before it started. So it's tough, and he's a guy with a lot of potential. So it was definitely tough. I think they got some guys at ILB who were kind of underrated. One guy in particular, his former Alabama teammate, 6th-round pick last year, Sean Dion Hamilton, pretty high on him and his athletic ability. But someone's going to have to step in there. And Foster was expected to be part of this vaunted front seven with a lot of talented players. And now that takes a nick out of the defense, which was already expected to be the team's crown jewel. They made some improvements on the offensive side of the ball, and there's some personnel changes in the offensive staff that could bode well for them, but you can't expect that to be their crutch. The defense still has all that talent. that's going to be the thing winning the Skins games. And losing Foster that early is definitely it's a tough blow. It's a tough pill to swallow.
So what's the word on Foster? Because I was hearing all kinds of things, like from the moment it happened, it's just an ACL. Oh, no, it's an ACL and an MCL, or it's an MCL, ACL, and nerve damage. This could be a career ender. Where did we finally land on it after they had a chance to step back from it, have the doctors examine what was going on in there? Where is Reuben Foster at, and what's his timetable? Is he good for 2020, or is he in the same boat with Alex Smith about we don't know?
He should be good for 2020. I think it was an ACL and MCL. He had successful surgery. That's already out of the way. So now he's just rehabbing, and it's a long process, a long, arduous process. But he should be back, and I think with some Alabama teammates to kind of be that support system for him, he should be in good spirits for most of it. So we'll see. He should be good, though. He won't come back mid-season. He won't be like Hunter Henry and almost come back in the playoffs. They know that's not going to happen. But for 2020, I think he should be good, and he'll still be young. Still have some time to capitalize on his prime. So hopefully, we'll see.
Well, that's good to hear, especially for him. Guy's been through a lot in his first year plus in the league, and he's looking like the 49ers made a huge mistake, and they acknowledged that by releasing him. The Redskins made what some people, like you said, made an even bigger mistake by giving him a job before he was cleared, and looks like everything was behind him. He's ready for this fresh start, and then boom, first step he takes, it's over already. Yep. So, that had to be quite a devastating moment for him. And then before we finally get over to the draft, the Trent Williams thing, what exactly is going on here? Because I've also heard conflicting reports about what his demands are. Like, he wants a new contract. No, he wants to be traded. He doesn't want to be in Washington anymore. What is the actual story?
It's funny that you ask, because no one really knows quite yet.
Wow.
It's interesting, man. First off, it was the contract thing. That came out that he was holding out for a new contract. That's the standard. Usually that's what you see players hold out for, and he's got 2 years left on his deal, so maybe he wanted to be paid like some of the top tackles in the league. The market has been reset numerous times since Williams signed his $13.5 a year deal. I think Trent Brown reset it at 16.5 this offseason. So Williams, he's still one of the top tackles in the league, wants to get paid that much. Then a report came out from Jason LaCanfora, that's which you got to take every report with a grain of salt, when it comes from guys like that. But
preaching to the choir on that one, brother. That guy has got a hard on for the Bears, and everything he says about the Bears is negative. There's never a positive word that comes out of his mouth, which makes us as Bear fans great, because his batting average is close to 0 for like the last several years. So whatever he says the Bears won't do, the Bears end up doing. So, but any report coming from LaCanfora has to be taken with a grain of salt, because he's been wrong a lot more than he's been right lately.
Yeah, and wherever you go, that's basically the consensus for sure. But with the Redskins particularly, they're pretty unpredictable when it comes to news, so you can never take anything out of the equation when it comes to them. Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen in tow. So Trent Williams, LaCanfora said that Trent Williams was demanding a trade, and that he was fed up with the medical staff, and they'd misdiagnosed some things and how they'd handled his medical issue. He had what might have been a tumor on his forehead this offseason that got removed safely. No adverse effects from that, and he should be good to go if he wants to play for Washington. But that was a report that said the differences were irreconcilable, and that he was going to be traded, or he was going to sit out. He wasn't going to suit up in burgundy and gold anymore. I've seen John Keim, Redskins ESPN beat reporter, comment on questions saying that no one really, it's still being settled, the whole situation. The Redskins obviously know Trent Williams' worth. They've seen him firsthand get 7 Pro Bowls over the span of his career. He's at his best when he's fully healthy. He's a dominant left tackle, a guy with that athleticism and that strength who can really just seal off the edge and be that guy. So, and especially with Dwayne Haskins, a rookie quarterback, you don't want to stunt his development. You want to get him in there, and you need that left tackle. You need that blind side protector. So they know his value, especially, both from a player profile standpoint and from a circumstantial standpoint. So they have a lot of decisions to make. I would say that La Canfora's report, at least, is not 100% accurate. I think for the right amount of money, Trent Williams will come back, and I think it'll get settled. But we don't have a lot of concrete information to go off of at this point. It's really still up in the air.
Yeah, so therein lies the leverage that Trent Williams has. You just mentioned it. He's one of the elite left tackles in this league, and you've got a rookie quarterback that you want to take care of. So you definitely want to keep your left tackle happy and in-house. But, so maybe that's what it is. He acknowledges the leverage. He wants a pay raise, so he's taking advantage of it now. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if La Canfora is anywhere close to right on that, and I doubt that he is, just because it's Jason La Canfora. But so let's move on to draft night. And the Redskins were a team that were getting talked about a lot on draft night because leading up to the draft, there were rumors that Daniel Snyder and company were going to pull off another RG3 trade to move up to 2 to guarantee that they get Dwayne Haskins. And that sounded just like the kind of risk that Daniel Snyder doesn't even think twice about in making those kind of moves. That, like I mentioned before, he's a guy that's not shy about giving out the big contracts. For a guy like him, apparently it's just money because he has no problem passing it out, which is why I'd like to be a friend of his so he can give me some. But, you're looking at the draft and the picks start coming. The Redskins don't move in a very un-Redskins-like thing. They sit and they wait, and the guy that they wanted all along lands in their lap at 15 with Haskins after the Giants passed him up, after the Broncos passed him up. They traded out of their spot and everything like that. He lands to Washington at 15. So you don't do anything, and you get what you want, which is kind of like something that would happen to your D.C. metro area mate with the Ravens. The Ravens were always a sit-and-wait team and always got the player that would just fall into their laps. Mm-hmm. And here it happens to the Redskins with Haskins. All the talk about trading away the store to get Haskins at number 2 or anything like that, you do nothing, and you get him anyway.
It's crazy, man. I was fully expecting that kind of move. I had a mock draft that I released like 30 minutes before the draft, and I had the Skins trading up to number 3 to get Haskins. And it was crazy. And I saw the picks just kept coming in. And after the Giants picked Jones and after the Broncos, the Skins fans had a field day with that one, by the way. It was fun. But and then after the Broncos traded down and the Steelers picked Bush at 10, and all of a sudden there's not a lot of QB needed teams, and you think, well, maybe the Dolphins will pick them. No, they get Christian Wilkins, and you're like, well, now we've just got the Falcons between us and Dwayne Haskins. And the Falcons obviously aren't picking them, so you got your guy. And that was just, to me, that was a masterstroke of patience. I don't know what happened in that front office. I've seen reports that maybe Snyder is changing. I'll believe it when I see it there, because he has a long track record of, those impulsive decisions and, trying to be the hero. But this was a step in the right direction. And I wasn't super high on Dwayne Haskins in the evaluation process. He was my QB3 in this draft class. I was high. I had Kyler as my QB1, and I was a bit higher on Drew Lock. Maybe looking back, I would have flip-flopped Lock and Haskins. But really getting a guy, at the end of the day, you got a guy with franchise potential with Haskins, a guy who's a pretty pro-ready quarterback, very solid mentally, very quick learner. And you see some film rooms with him where he's breaking down plays, and he has a very innate understanding of, the inner workings of every play and how it manipulates the defense. And that was something that really struck me in evaluation of Haskins. And, he's got good arm talent, maybe not great, but, he can make most of the throws, pretty accurate. Just a guy who can give you a winning team on a rookie contract. And, if he gets good enough in those 4 years, you can re-sign him. And it's just a high upside move. And they didn't really give up a lot. People were expecting them to trade up and give up the farm and getting those RG3 nightmares, and none of it happened. And that was a very refreshing change, over here watching this team, because you don't get that often.
Yeah, it was very interesting watching it all unfold the way that it did, and knowing the Redskins and their reputation for making these big, bold moves and things like that. You mentioned Daniel Snyder and how he may be maturing in his old age, or as he progresses in age, I should say. I don't exactly know how old he is, but it's just maybe it is a sign that things are changing, or at least that Snyder is letting the front office do their jobs, kind of thing. And instead of coming in and making an executive decision and say, go get this guy, he's the guy I want, because there's no secret that Shanahan didn't want RG3, or at least he didn't want to give up the farm to get RG3. He always liked Kirk Cousins. That's why he took him in the 4th round, and so on and so forth. And that turned out to be the right move, as opposed to giving up 3 first-rounders for a 1-year wonder in RG3, even though injuries caused years 2 and beyond to not be as successful. What happened, and the Redskins had a hard time recovering from it. So, to have Haskins just fall to you like that, watching it unfold the way it has, because that was a common thread throughout the first round as we drew closer and closer to 15, where the Redskins were picking, Jones coming off the board, which was hilarious, by the way. My Giants guy that I talked to the other day, he's drinking the Kool-Aid as far as he likes Daniel Jones, maybe not at number 6, but he liked Daniel Jones. So doesn't like Jones at 6, but he likes Jones. He thinks there could be some things there. So
I'll be diplomatic. I did not have Jones high on my QB rankings.
Okay.
I won't disclose it, but he was not in my top 5.
Neither. He wasn't very high on my draft experts board either. I have Scott Wright from draftcountdown.com. He's my draft guy, and he didn't have Jones in the top 40 or something. It was not a good grade.
I think people really inflated the whole Cutcliffe factor, the Manning connections. I don't see what else could do it, because looking at his tape, he's a tough guy. You got to give that to him. But I didn't see any traits that stood out that would want me to use a top 10 pick on him. To summate it all in simple terms, and that was a baffling pick for me. And I thought the Giants would have been much better off taking Haskins or even Locke. At least with Locke, his footwork is a nightmare, but at least you can see the arm talent and the traits worth developing. Maybe with Jones, I don't even really see that. So I don't know.
Maybe Locke would have been a better guy had they held on to OBJ.
Maybe,
because the arm strength, just throw it up there, let Beckham go out and do something insane to catch it with one finger or something like that. But so it's all about how it all comes together. But watching it unfold and everyone talking about Haskins still being on the board and him finally, not only did he fall, but he fell to the team that wanted him all along and did nothing but wait for him to get there. So it was crazy to watch it all unfold the way that it did. And then at the bottom half of the first round, the Redskins trade back in to the first round in kind of what I would consider a holy crap, this guy's still on the board kind of move, and taking Montez Sweat off the old outside linebacker from Mississippi State, who did have some health concerns, but obviously the Redskins weren't one of those teams.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was capitalizing on some hesitancy around the league, and they've been ones to do that in the past. In 2017, when Jonathan Allen dropped because of lingering concerns around arthritis in his shoulders, the Redskins picked him up, and he's been a borderline Pro Bowler on their interior line. So they've been the beneficiaries on the opposite end of that numerous occasions, and this is just the latest one. Montez Sweat. He was my edge 3, but this is a very strong edge class, so I no concerns there, And he said himself, I think that the heart issue that he had has been cleared. It's a minor issue, so it shouldn't be expected to affect his play. And you look at his measurables. Everyone talks about the 4.41 40 that he ran at 6'6", 260.
Yeah.
Now that I want to say right now, that's insane. But that's not what we should be freaking out about, because straight line speed like that's not what edge rushers use to win. They use bend, they use length, they use strength at the point of attack. I'll give him this. He doesn't have the bend. I liked Brian Burns in that regard, but Sweat has almost everything else. He's got the strength. He's got the power to just be a force on that line. He's got the length. His arms are crazy long, so he can keep his hands clean and keep the offensive linemen from getting their anchors on him, and just use that leverage to get around the edge. And of course, he's got the speed to accelerate towards the quarterback and everything, and the burst. Most of the traits are there. And he's very athletic, a ton of potential there. And to get him at the end of the first round, that's a clear need, because they were not going to go into the season with Ryan Anderson as their starter and sleep well at night. I can tell you that. So getting Sweat, getting a guy with that potential, especially with Ryan Kerrigan still in his prime, I mean, he can learn from Kerrigan. It's really a great situation, and I'll give him props for that. They gave up their second rounder this year and next year, but depending on gauging his upside right now, it looks like it was worth it. Obviously, we won't see how he progresses in the NFL, but he certainly has the traits to be very, very good.
All right, and then we move into day 2. Terry McLaurin out of Ohio State, so a guy that caught passes from Haskins, joins the team, and then Bryce Love, the runner-up to the Heisman in 2017, did not have the best 2018. Probably should have come out as far as when his draft stock would have been at its highest. Gets taken by the Skins in the 4th round, so you add him to the backfield with Geis and Adrian Peterson. That's looking pretty good. And then those 2 interior linemen you talked about in the 4th and 5th round, Wes Martin, a guard out of Indiana, Ross Pierschbacher. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it.
Bam, I'm good with names. Center out of Alabama in the 5th round. Then Cole Holcomb, inside linebacker out of North Carolina, in 2nd and 5th round pick. And then in day 3, or we're already in day 3, but 6th round, Kelvin Harmon, a wide receiver out of NC State, Jimmy Moreland, cornerback out of James Madison, Jordan Brailford, outside linebacker, Oklahoma State, And so past your top 2 picks with Haskins and Sweat, where, Redskins fan have to be overjoyed. Number one, you didn't give up the farm to get Haskins. He fell into your lap. And then number 2, you take advantage of what you call the hesitancy of other teams and pick up one of the highest rated prospects in the draft at 26. So how are we feeling about day 2 and beyond with the rest of your choices?
Yeah, I think the Redskins, they got good value with Haskins not having to trade up and then getting Montez Sweat. And I think that theme of value really carried over into the rest of the draft. They only had one day 2 pick. They got Terry McLaurin out of Ohio State. I think that's a guy you got good chemistry up front with Dwayne Haskins. And Brad Kelly posted something on Twitter about McLaurin during his pro day, said he's a elite technician at receiver that doubles as an elite athlete. So I think there's a lot of good potential there, with the detail that he places in his game, but also the traits that he has and the ability that he has to maximize and get that separation. I think he could be a very good player for the Redskins, and getting him in the 3rd round, I think, is excellent value, especially for a team that needs immediate contributors to that position. Moving in round 4 and on into day 3, I thought generally that theme carried over into day 3 as well. My favorite picks, Kelvin Harmon and Jimmy Moreland. Kelvin Harmon is a guy who I had a 2nd round grade on him. That might be a little high. I know his 4.6 40 is really slow. Having that top end speed would help him in the NFL, but he's an alpha dog at receiver, man. He can get those contested catches, win in those one-on-one situations. He's got very good play strength and pretty good nuance with his routes too. So I really like his ability. He's kind of a different type of receiver than McLaurin. Get some different flavors in there, which could be good. Also like Jimmy Moreland. Get this, Moreland in his career, 4-year career at James Madison, had 18 interceptions and 63 pass deflections. So he knows how to make plays on the ball. Yeah, he's good, and he's been making waves already in OTAs and training camp. I think he had 3 interceptions in one practice session 1 week, which the offense, of course, needs to kind of get their act together after that. But it's also a testament to Moreland's closing speed on the ball and just his knack to really high point it and, hone in on it and get that innate focus in the heat of the moment. Not a lot of players can do that. Moreland looks like he has that, and he's got that alpha mentality for a slot corner mold, kind of small, but good potential there, especially for a 7th round pick. Also got Jordan Brailford at edge rusher, who's got good athletic traits. Some picks I didn't like as much. Bryce Love, he's got potential for sure. He was a really, really productive rusher in college, was a Heisman candidate in 2016. but or 20. I think it was 20. It was either 16 or 17.
2017. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got the year wrong, but yeah. So at his best, he was a very explosive runner. But I didn't like his lack of utility as a receiver. He never quite developed in that area, and also tore his ACL, which he has a running style that's predicated on explosiveness. So I'm not sure how he'll come back from that. So that'll be interesting. And the Redskins running back room is kind of crowded already. You got Darius Geis, Adrian Peterson, Chris Thompson, who's considered one of the better third down backs in the league, and Byron Marshall is a guy who Jay Gruden is really high on. So it's going to be interesting to see where he fits in there. Also, Ross Pierschbacher, he's good depth, though, in the 5th round, so I was okay with him. Wes Martin, a potential starter at a left guard in round 4, a very strong player. I hadn't heard much about him when he was picked, but he's got the power to be a force on the line, and really could. He's got tools that Bill Callahan can work with. You like your offensive lineman to have one of those tools to mold around, whether it's athleticism or strength or length. And Martin definitely has the power to be a very good piece. And then Cole Holcomb was their 5th rounder at linebacker. He's an athletic guy. I think his pro day results were very impressive. He had like a 4.48 40-yard dash and a 38-inch vertical. And he's a pretty well-built guy, very stocky build. So I think he's sturdy, but also has great athletic potential. Still kind of raw, but in round 5, that's what you're going for, right? You're going for developmental potential. I think the Redskins really stuck with that value theme. Love to me was a bit of a luxury pick. They could have had better value at that position if they were going running back. Could have gotten a guy in round 7, even undrafted. Yeah, aside from that pick, you can't really harp on much. They really did what they set out to do, and that was strengthen the roster, add young talent with good upside, and ultimately they might have reset their navigational path. After Alex Smith was injured, we were talking about how long is it going to take for them to get back and rebuild. They have all this money tied up. But the best way to build a team in the NFL is to draft well, and that's what the Redskins did in 2019. There's no going around it. So exciting stuff for sure. Of course, the puzzle is not solved yet, but moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I can attest to the drafting well thing. It's something that the Bears failed to do for several years. There were a lot more misses than hits in their draft classes. It's what cost our last 2 GMs their jobs. Jerry Angelo was let go in 2011. His replacement, Phil Emery, was only got 3 years, and they let him go after the 2014 season. Ryan Pace has been outstanding, especially on day 3. We have gotten at least 5 or 6 guys on the team now that were day 3 picks. Tariq Cohen was a day 3 pick. Eddie Jackson was a day 3. Bilal Nichols last year was a day 3 pick. And so on. So, those are just a few examples. And he's also been kicking ass in the undrafted free agency pool as well. Bryce Callahan, who just got a big deal with the Broncos, was an undrafted guy. Crevon LeBlanc, who was let go but went to Philadelphia, has been a strong player. So those day 3 picks and the undrafted guys, those are the ones that, like you said, they're projects. You're hoping to get a hit on some of them. And I've watched the Bears do it, and I suffered in the NFC North when the Packers kept doing it year in and year out. Because another thing that the Redskins were able to do was collect a lot of picks. So you got 10 draft choices in the 2019 class. So, and the majority of them were on day 3. 7 out of the 10 were day 3 picks. So, when you can have 3 5th or 2 5th rounders, 2 7th rounders, 2 4th rounders, the chance that one of them will hit, the probability goes up. So the chances that you get a guy that will be able to make the roster, like you're talking about Moreland, that corner out of James Madison. Yeah, he was a 7th round pick, but this is a guy, he's got a pedigree. James Madison, I don't know if you know, was the team that broke North Dakota State's national championship streak a couple of years ago. He was on that team. So he knows what it takes to win football games, and apparently he is not allergic to the football when he's out there. He's a lot of DBs play DB because they can't catch the ball. You always hear that when DBs drop the ball. Well, that's why you play defense kind of thing. Apparently that's not a problem for Jimmy Moreland. So
yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. He's not allergic to the football, and you get these guys, in the later rounds, in the early rounds, guys are more complete. That's what you're going for. You're going for that security.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that the later round picks are any less valuable. In a sense they are, because they're less secure. But, if you use them the right way, they can be so valuable to your team.
Absolutely.
And I'm a certified pick hoarder. Like, I love maximizing your chances to get that young talent. And so I think if you can get those guys that have those traits that you can mold, it really bodes well for your roster. Of course, that's not the end game. You need the coaches to develop those guys, and you need the support system with the leadership, and you don't want to rush them, but you get those guys with that potential, it can go a long way toward building a roster. So I really liked overall what they did, getting all those picks and using them on the type of players that they did. It's a model that's been successful before with teams in the NFL, and so it's a good one to follow.
Yeah. When Ryan Pace took over as general manager, he had a press conference. And that's where I really kind of was sold on him, because there were other guys that the Bears were interested in that I thought they should kind of go over. Shows what the hell I know, but still. One thing that he said was that he did kind of want to model himself after the Packers, who were notorious for being very stingy in free agency, who were notorious for stacking up on draft picks and developing their own guys. The example that he used is like right now, at this point in the offseason, the Packers have, let's say 47 guys on their active roster, and 46 of them have only ever played for the Green Bay Packers. The exception to the rule at that time in 2015, the only guy on the team that didn't play his entire career in Green Bay was Julius Peppers, who was a free agent after the Bears let him go. So that was the one guy on the team who played for the Packers that hadn't only always played for Green Bay. That's the thing that he envisions, that he hopes that he can say about the Bears one day, is that he's got a roster full of guys that have only ever been Bears. So if you can do that, if you can build a team through the draft while cherry picking here and there to get an impact player or a stud in free agency, that's got to be the best way to succeed in the NFL. That's got to be the stencil, if you will, that you want to follow.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a number of, intrinsic benefits that come from that, whether it's the rookie contracts, you got flexibility if you want to add the finishing pieces in free agency. There's the youth aspect of it, guys who are ascending, guys who are still waiting to meet their prime, and, it could all peak at the right time. And then there's also the stability of having all those guys in-house that you developed. You don't have to bring a new guy in and rely on all these different pieces coming together. You can kind of bring it along a little more organically. And so, that's the right way to do it. It's more efficient. It's, gives you more flexibility. And ultimately, I think the Redskins did a good job this year. Time will tell if it's sustainable, but on the right path for sure.
So as we look ahead to 2019, we take a look at what some of the major storylines might be. We've already talked about a couple of them. We talked about the impending quarterback battle. You think it's pretty much a done deal. It's Haskins' job to lose, but don't be surprised if Case Keenum is at least starting week one. You have the Trent Williams thing. You have the injury thing, starting off with Reuben Foster on the first play of OTAs. Is that something that's going to plague the Redskins? One storyline that I would like to talk about is Jay Gruden. They've struggled, and looking at your schedule, this is not going to be the year that Jay Gruden wants to get off to a slow start. The first 5 games of the year, you have 3 division games, the Bears and the Patriots in the first 5 games. You start at Philly, you're home for the Cowboys, home for the Bears on Monday night, at the Giants, and then you're home for the New England Patriots. 4 playoff teams and the Giants in the first 5 games. This is not going, as daunting as that is, it's also the last thing that somebody like Jay Gruden would want to see if he gets off to another slow start. How quickly would the Redskins, if they would, pull the trigger on Gruden if things go sideways early on?
It's tough, man. It's really tough to say, actually, because, before Dwayne Haskins came into the picture, it was Case Keenum. It looked like that this season was going to be a lame duck year for Gruden. It looked like he was as good as gone. Now you bring Haskins into the equation. you don't want to get rid of that continuity for a rookie quarterback. You don't want to pull the rug out from under him after he's already entered the league. And I think, there's a way that they could get rid of Gruden and still keep that continuity with Kevin O'Connell. If we had time to talk about him in a little bit, he could be a rising offensive mind that the Redskins are waiting to kind of pounce on and keep him locked up. But if Jay Gruden, if he connects himself and if he establishes himself, I can't talk today, my guy. If he establishes himself as a guy who is integral to Haskins' development, even if they don't do well in those first 5 games, they have to keep him, because that could have a detrimental effect toward Haskins, your rookie quarterback who you invested a first-round pick in. So a lot of intertwining factors. Before the draft, it was a little more simple. It's like, yeah, Gruden's probably going to lose. He's probably going to get fired. Yeah, whatever. Now it's like, even if he loses, is Haskins making progress? Is the offense showing signs of life? Because all of a sudden, this isn't a win now thing. Like, I'm sure they'd love to compete now, but they're looking past this year as well. They're looking, okay, how can we maximize this window with Haskins? It's not all of a sudden I need to save my job. And, Gruden's probably inside, he's thinking that, but there are ways that he can keep his job without winning necessarily. And I think in those first few games, the context is really going to be important, as to whether Haskins is, succeeding or not. I think if Gruden goes the way of, I think he could go the way of Hugh Jackson. We looked at Jackson. He didn't start Baker Mayfield right away with Cleveland, and the team was really not doing well, not showing a lot of consistency under Jackson, and weren't playing to their talent level. They let him go, put Freddie Kitchens in there, and all of a sudden it was a match made in heaven. And I think Kevin O'Connell, you look at him, he's a guy for the Redskins who he was recently promoted to offensive coordinator, and he's one of those new wave offensive minds. He's made some comments kind of embracing analytics and play action and all those different ways to get an edge in the modern game. You look at all these offensive minds that are getting jobs. Matt Nagy is one example. Kyle Shanahan, it's the new way to win in the NFL. You got to find those analytical advantages, and you got to try and, find an edge wherever you can. You can't really settle for the old ways, just ground and pound. O'Connell is one of those guys, judging by some comments he's made in press conferences. And, if they really think the Redskins had a scare with Sean McVay, this was an up-and-coming guy, they let him go. He's in the Super Bowl. All of a sudden, they get another young, up-and-coming guy in O'Connell. I don't think they're going to want to make the same mistake again. That's not to say that O'Connell is McVay, but it's just like it feels like deja vu for them. And I think if Gruden is not really performing up to par with Haskins, they could let him go early, cut the cord early, and just start the new era right away. It might be a little iffy at first, might kind of chip away at the foundation a little bit, but it's better to make that move sooner rather than later. So, but I think Gruden would have to be really bad for that to happen, because Gruden has gotten off to a quick start with Haskins. From all accounts, things are going well, so we'll see what happens. But that first stretch is brutal, and I think if anything were to catalyze the release of Gruden and the next wave, hiring Kevin O'Connell and getting him in that position, that would be it. Because you look at that schedule, 3 division teams, no divisional game is a gimme in the NFC East, and then the Bears and the Patriots. The Patriots every year, they're tough. I don't expect a win there. And then of course the Bears, who should, if Trubisky can take the next step this year, if the defense can maintain the level that they were on last year, or even come close to that, then it'll be a tough out for the Redskins. And I think Jay Gruden will have his work cut out for them in that 5-game stretch for sure.
Yeah, it's when I was looking at the schedule, it's like that stuck out like a sore thumb, as well as the tail end of the schedule. The last 4 games at Green Bay, and then 3 straight divisional games again. Philly, home for Philly, home for the Giants, at Dallas. So you got to start fast and you got to finish fast, because those games all, like the first 4 games, you got 3 divisional games and the Bears, but that's all NFC. Those are all conference games that can all mean something at the end of the season. And then the last 3 games with Philly, New York, and and Dallas 3 more divisional games. That could very well be deciding who wins the division and who doesn't at the end. So you got to finish strong. You got to start strong. There's no easing your way into it with the rookie. You got to hit the ground running if he's going to be your guy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where they really have to decide what the purpose of this season is, because you don't want to like get into the season, you start winning a little bit, all of a sudden you're putting all this pressure on a rookie quarterback, like, hey, we can actually do something this year, and then have it blow up in your faces. That happened with RG3, where they were in the playoffs. He was doing really well, and then he blew out his knee. Wasn't quite the same after that because they kept him in the game. And, it was very detrimental, and obviously the same thing wouldn't happen with Haskins. They're different style players, but, you don't want to put that pressure on a rookie quarterback before he's ready. And I think Haskins will be ready for the most part. He's a pro-ready guy, very mentally quick. So I'm confident in that. But at the same time, if you're competing for something, you got to make sure everyone's on board, and it's going to be interesting to see because you have a clashing timelines in a sense where Haskins is a rookie quarterback, and no matter how pro ready he is, he's going to have a lot of learning curves to meet. And because the quarterback is such a position, it's a position with so much depth, so much area to improve. You can say a guy is mentally adept, as a rookie prospect coming in, but still, even when he enters the NFL, there's terminology he's got to get down. There's play concepts he's got to get down, stuff to look for, keys on every different play. So, he's definitely got a lot of ground to make up no matter how ready he is. And then on the flip side, you have Jay Gruden, who we're talking about. If he wants to keep his job, he might not have the opportunity to take that time. So it's very interesting to see how those two storylines meet. I'm curious. I think, it's just a guess. I think Gruden will keep his job, but if it's very bad in those first 5 games, we could see a change in the regime. And if that happens, then those last 5 games don't matter because they're not winning anything after firing their head coach midseason. They're just trying to establish that next era. And so we'll see what the main purpose of the 2019 season ends up being. But for now, it's up in the air. They've said they want to win now, but I don't know if that's in the cards exactly.
So how important do you think the preseason is in establishing all that and finding out if Haskins is ready yet, or if it's going to be Keenum's job to lose, or for him to hold on to the job until Haskins is ready, and that kind of thing? How important is the preseason? And is Jay Gruden one of those guys that plays his guys in the preseason? Because we as Bear fans learned the hard way, and Ram fans as well have learned Nagy and McVay like to save their guys. We barely saw our starters, even in the dress rehearsal game. They didn't play at all last year. So is Gruden the guy that's going to put his starters out there to get them ready for the season, or is he going to save them in order to save them for the season?
He's usually a guy that likes to save his starters. I would say he does play. If they're younger, he'll play them to get them experience and exposure. After last year, he might be even more conservative there, though, because Darius Geis tore his ACL in the first quarter, I think, against the Patriots in the preseason. And with all the injuries that the Redskins have, Gruden might play it super safe and just dial it back a ton and just be like, all right, dress rehearsal game, week 3, that's all you're getting if you're a starter. So I don't know. He's generally been conservative with that, and we might see that dialed up even further this preseason. But with Haskins getting in there, you want him to hit the ground running. You want to make sure his development stays moving quickly. So any preseason reps he gets are valuable, but at the same time, you don't want to stunt his development by getting him injured, especially if Trent Williams isn't in there. That's another factor. So you see, with the Redskins, there's so many different things working toward each situation. It's tough to say, but I would say in the past, Gruden has been conservative in terms of keeping starters on the field. So we'll see. But young players always need that experience. It's also good to sit on the bench and learn. So a good balance needs to be had. I think after the injuries, all that stuff, and especially with Case Keenum as an insurance policy, I think they'll play it safe. But yeah, we'll see.
Right. So what are some of the other storylines that we need to be keeping our eyes on as we head into 2019?
Okay. Well, I mentioned Kevin O'Connell.
Right.
In the NFL, you need those offensive minds. You need to be up to date. And he's a guy, the Redskins with Gruden. Gruden is widely renowned as an offensive mind himself. That was the whole reason he got hired. But I think in recent years, he's starting to become outdated. Last year, their winning style on offense with Adrian Peterson was not sustainable, and they were running a lot. At times, they should have passed the ball. They were leaving a lot of efficiency on the field. I think Kevin O'Connell is the guy who can bring that back, and that'll be big for them because they do have some talent on the offense, some potential there. And coaching can go a long way toward unlocking that. You can have very talented guys on offenses that are not well coached and they can get buried. And you can have guys who aren't necessarily the most talented, but they have a coach who can scheme them open and scheme them open in the right situations. And it changes the whole complexion. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kevin O'Connell impacts that. And if he is what the Redskins think he is, and if he is what, he's being hyped up to be, it could be a huge change for this team, and it could put them in contention way earlier than expected. So we'll see what happens there. Also, Jay Gruden, as long as he's still the head coach, he could be calling plays and he could be, asserting his control there. So we'll see, but there's some promise there, so something to keep an eye on. Also, the receiving core, mentioned that, but there's a lot of guys with kind of untapped potential there. And when people talk about the Redskins receiving core, it's usually the worst in the NFL, or one of the worst in the NFL, which I won't deny. If you're going by proven talent, it's one of the worst in the NFL. But there's some guys with potential that can't be overlooked. We talked about McLaurin and Harmon, the two rookies. Those are two guys who really have different skill sets that could be effective early on. And McLaurin, he's got the chemistry with Haskins, was Haskins' favorite target in college. So that's something to look forward to. Trey Quinn in the slot, Mr. Irrelevant last year, one of my favorite picks from last year. He's a guy who's very, we talk about nuance with route running a lot. He's good with those fine details at the stem to get open, and he's also a pretty tough, stocky guy. He had some trouble with injuries last season, but when he has the opportunity to make those contested catches, his hands are sticky, man. So I'm excited to see him, and they've kind of committed to him as the slot receiver. He only caught, I think, 7 or 9 passes last season, so he didn't get a lot of playing time. I think 9 passes and a touchdown. He didn't get a ton of playing time. Injuries hurt him, but Jay Gruden is committing to him early, and that says a lot about what he's shown in the offseason. So Trey Quinn is a guy to watch for sure, and there's some other guys too. Paul Richardson signed a lot of money. A $40 million deal, 5-year, $40 million deal last offseason. He's got a lot of speed. They're paying him to make an impact. Injuries have kind of hurt him as well, but he's a guy who could contribute too, so a lot of potential there.
And you also have Josh Dotson, who's was a first-round pick, and they did not pick up his 5th-year option, so he's in a prove-it year this year, and you never can count out those guys that are playing for their next contract. We here at the Bears can attest to that with Kyle Fuller. This was a guy going into the 2017 season, who we had written him off. He was done. He had flashes as a rookie. He kind of disappeared a bit in 2015. 2016, he did not play a down. He had arthroscopic knee surgery and did not play a snap. Vic Fangio was publicly talking down to him with the media, like, I don't think he wants to play. That's first, they have to tell the doctor that he's ready, then the player has to say he's ready, and the player hasn't said he's ready. He didn't play in 2016. There was rumors he wouldn't even make the team in 2017. He has that big blow-up year, and he's played like a stud ever since. So if Josh Dotson,
in the league,
absolutely. So if you look at Josh Dotson, you're thinking / hoping that the fact that his days in Washington are numbered, because if he doesn't play well, why would the Redskins re-sign him? So he's literally playing for his future this year, and that can motivate guys in a way that the security can't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Dotson is a guy who still has that athletic potential that hasn't really been tapped into yet. Now, you got to think, has his development been stunted too much by injuries and bad coaching where he simply can't make that leap in Washington? I don't know. Also, it's going to be interesting how they use him, because you look at it from that perspective, yeah, he's an improve it year, but the Redskins have guys like Harmon and McLaurin, like I said, and Cam Sims is another guy who's been really flashing in OTAs. He was an undrafted free agent last year from Alabama who's really been making waves, and there's talk that he could be a starter for this team. And you look at Doxson, he's a guy who his future is kind of, the writing is on the wall. Would the Redskins really want to invest their time in Doxson or a younger guy who might have a future with the team? I don't know. Me personally, I would like to put Doxson on the field. He's your best athlete, and he's still got that potential. You want to put your best players on the field, but that might not be how they see it. They might see it as, all right, get this year, try and get some money next year. But, for us, for our team, we have a different vision. We'll see. I would want to use Doxson. I think he's got a ton of potential. I would try and put him in the slot. They like to put him on the boundary, but in the slot, kind of cultivate that separation for him, allow him to work in space. He's got definite vertical ability, 41-inch vertical. He has some plays where he just rises above the entire defense. You don't know how he got there. His flashes are very bright. I think he's a guy who could emerge, especially with a guy like Dwayne Haskins throwing to him. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And these are the kind of circumstances where a guy like that can either emerge or get buried. And so it's going to be interesting to see. There's a lot of different players, a lot of different dynamics in that receiving core where, a lot of different potential possibilities could materialize later in the season. So that's very exciting to me, because a lot of people kind of write off this receiving core, but there's so many different flavors. You just look at it, you have no idea how it's going to play out. And I think Doxson is a guy who could either reap the benefits from all the uncertainty or ultimately be buried by it. And so that'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, you got to. It's when the pressure is on, how will the player respond? And it's there's it doesn't really get much bigger than either you perform or you're going to be looking for work elsewhere next year. And it's crazy how that can affect a player if he doesn't step up when his number gets called. So will they use him like you said, or will they dedicate their time and say, well, we made the investment, it didn't work out, we'll pay him his money and then send him on his way, but we're gonna develop McLaurin and Harmon and Sims and all the rest of those guys, and guys that we know we can count on, as opposed to this high-priced rookie that's done nothing but cost us money.
Yeah, exactly.
So how about on the defensive side? Any position battles, storylines coming out of the defense we want to keep an eye on?
Well, if I haven't talked about the defensive line, I'll just touch on that real quick. It's a very talented group. You have Ryan Kerrigan, who is one of the more perennially underrated players in the league. And then you have Montez Sweat across from him. We talked about him in the draft breakdown earlier, but Sweat is a great potential prospect. And then on the interior line, you got a really good combination of Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Matt Ioannidis, coached by Jim Tomsula, as we said. And that Tomsula has worked wonders with them. I don't know what he's been doing. He's a very energetic guy, but he's been exceeded even the wildest expectations. And that unit is really taking a life of its own and becoming one of the better defensive fronts in the entire league. I think linebacking core.
Wait. Tomsula, that's the former head coach of the 49ers, right?
Yeah.
So that's where he ended up.
Yeah, the mustache. Okay. Working
because I know that when they hired him as head coach, they got him like a 4-year deal, and they fired him after one. I don't remember when exactly that was, but I figured he'd still be at home stealing money right now.
No.
He went out and got a job, huh?
Yeah. He was
nice.
He was giddy with excitement, man. He's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get my working cap back on. And he's I think he's in his niche with a more specialized role on the defensive line. And really, it's been crazy, man, the development, because for so many years, for almost 2 decades, the Redskins defensive line was like the Achilles heel. Like they could not get anything done. Teams would run down their throat. They wouldn't get any interior pressure. Now they have Matt Ioannidis, who had a pass rush productivity rating on par with guys like Geno Atkins last season. They have Daron Payne, a young first-rounder who really made an impact last year, was a brick wall in run defense. And Jonathan Allen, who's kind of a mix of the two. He can really pass rush pretty well, but also has the utility against the run. It's a very, very, very dynamic trio, and they're all under 25 years old, so they're all ascending. So that's a very exciting position group. And behind them, they have Caleb Brantley, who was a potential early round pick a couple years ago, an assault charge, I think, pushing him back to the 6th round where the Browns picked him. But he's got athletic potential too. And then Tim Settle, Virginia Tech product, who he's more of a nose tackle, but he's got good athleticism for a nose tackle. So it's a deep unit with very, very good top-end talent, Pro Bowl potential talent, maybe even All-Pro for guys like Jonathan Allen and Payne down the line. But, we'll see. That's way down the line. That's just total projections. We'll see. The guys that will reap the benefits from that defensive front, the linebackers and the secondary, it's a little less certain in those units. With Reuben Foster gone, Sean Dion Hamilton will look to fill in at linebacker, and he's a guy that has some potential. I wrote an article on him recently, actually just this morning. He showed a lot of good traits at Alabama. He's got good sideline-to-sideline speed, very good instincts for a linebacker, and pretty physical as well, just a complete player. Maybe not as much athletic upside as Reuben Foster, but a guy who could be a solid starter with the right opportunity. And he was a 6th-round pick last year. The reason he fell that far was because he tore his ACL and broke his kneecap all on his right knee. So he's got some injury issues, some concerns there, but he's stayed healthy thus far in his NFL career. So we'll see if it pans out. In the secondary, the Redskins have a lot of pieces coming together, a lot of guys who haven't quite proven themselves, but could. They certainly have the traits. Josh Norman, still a solid corner. I think his contract value kind of overshadows it because it's not a very good value in terms of a monetary standpoint, but he's still a pretty good corner who can disrupt the ball. He has the trademark peanut punch where he'll just knock it out, forces the fumbles. Very good with that, and he's also got long arms. He can deflect passes and stuff like that. So he's still playing pretty well. Not quite in his prime anymore. And he could fall off the cliff at any moment because I think the traditional cliff for a cornerback in the NFL is age 30. He's 32, so that's dangerous. But so you're playing with fire there. But they have some other good players at corner too. Quentin Dunbar. Get this, Dunbar is a former undrafted wide receiver, turned corner, and now he's a starter. And last year in 7 games, he had 2 interceptions, 9 pass deflections, 6'2", very good speed and length. And I think a diligent film room worker as well. He's always talking about getting in the film room and working, and his improvement has been amazing over the past 2 years. Like insane, man, to see a guy who came into the league as an undrafted wide receiver progressing so quickly as a corner. I think he's due for a breakout season. And then you got Fabian Moreau in the slot. He's a guy who has a great size and speed combination as well. So that's a unit. A lot of potential there. Hasn't quite been realized yet, but don't be surprised if they kind of impress a few people. And then in the safety grouping, Landon Collins coming in as the top paid safety. We talked about him earlier. And then Monte Nicholson, Michigan State product back in, I think he was a 2017 4th rounder for the team in his rookie season. He really flashed. He showed a lot of good traits. He's got very impressive range, 4.4 speed, 6'2", very lanky frame. So he's got the range to make plays sideline to sideline and flip his hips and clamp up those deep routes. And they had him as a single high guy a lot of the times. In 2017, they switched to two high safeties or cover 2, I think. Yeah, in 2018, and Nicholson kind of regressed a little bit. Had some legal issues, but those are all cleared up now, and he's trying to bounce back. So we'll see if it happens. He's certainly got the physical potential to be a really good complement to Landon Collins because, in terms of their skill sets, Collins is very good in the box. Nicholson's that rangy guy, so they complement each other really well. It's just can they put it together? And so a lot of potential on that back end, but has yet to be realized, and it's going to be interesting to see if it happens.
Yeah, it's always tough when you're going into a season and you see what could be.
Yeah.
You see what could be if this happens. Oh man, I pray that this, or I hope for that, and sitting back and biting your nails, gritting your teeth, waiting for that to happen or waiting for something not to happen, like in the Redskins case with the injuries the last couple of years.
Yeah.
how many of our guys are actually going to make it to the end of the season, or are we going to have a roster half filled with replacements and off the street free agents and things like that? Are Kelvin Harmon and Jimmy Moreland going to be starters, not because they earned it, but because we got nobody else, kind of thing. So I mean, the Bears suffered through that greatly through the John Fox era. We couldn't keep guys on the field, and we were, the you couldn't make me do that if you paid me kind of thing. Well, we were paying them, and they still wouldn't make it on the field anyway. That's how bad it was. So, it's one of those things where you see the potential, what could happen. You just got to, sit there and wait for it to actually come to fruition is probably the hardest part about being a fan, because you look at your team, you see the upside, you see the potential there. Most fans, anyway, look at their teams with rose-colored glasses, and you look at everything that's positive, what could go right, while thinking as little as humanly possible about what could definitely go wrong, even if that's staring you right in the face. So, you sit there and you hope that things bounce the way, and you love to think and fantasize about what the potential could be if it all does finally bounce your way and things go right for the Redskins this year.
Yeah, and you're talking to a Lions and Redskins fan, so I have been, oh my God, I can't even tell you the pain that I've gone through. But no, it's fine. But yeah, that's been the MO for the Redskins. They've always had potential. Can they put it together? And I'll tell people, who will be getting excited. I hate to be this Debbie Downer, but how often has it all come together? And
right.
You got to say never. The pieces never all come together in your favor. I feel like they're due for a good year because the last 2 years, most injuries in the league. But there's some factors that could hold them back. Jay Gruden, has he hit his ceiling as a coach? Greg Minuski, is he a good defensive coordinator? Who uses his personnel efficiently? I would beg to disagree on that one. Trent Williams, is he coming back? Because if he's not coming back, that offensive line, it's a major chunk. And then obviously on the defense, we just went over it. A lot of young guys with potential, but can they realize that potential? And I'm willing to bet, as much as I'd like to think that they all will, I'm willing to bet that it won't all be, just good as new come the end of the season. I think some guys are going to be kind of filtered out, and we'll have to see. But you always love to look at the potential, like you said.
Yeah.
It's not always meant to be, though.
Yeah, and it always seems to be the way that when you're excited about potential, your team comes out and has this amazing offseason. You as a Lions fan definitely understand that. Yes. How many times have the Lions been the champions of the preseason only to go 3-13 or 4-12, or in that one year in 2008 they went 4-0, 5-0 in the preseason, went 0-16 in the regular season. I mean, talk about really shooting the fans in the face. That was with their hopes and dreams on that one. So
I remember losing to the bottom feeder Rams. I remember watching us, I think the Rams did a fake field goal and got a wide open touchdown, and that was the moment I knew we'd hit rock bottom, because the Rams were 2-14 at that point. We were getting fooled by them. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, so I mean that's tough. So, but yeah, I mean it's one of those things when you have a team that has seen more struggles than happy days. You wonder, when will the string finally run out? As Bear fans, and you've talked about it with the injuries, it's like, we can't just keep always getting hurt, right? It's got to stop at some point. I mean, even if we cut the injuries in half, we'll be in great shape. That was one of the things about those teams with John Fox, is that obviously we're not winning football games, but we lost half our roster to injuries. What could we have done if we had most of those guys back healthy, or we didn't lose this guy here and there and so on. And you wonder, what would the 2018 Redskins have done if Alex Smith hadn't gotten hurt last year? Do you draft Dwayne Haskins this year as a project quarterback, or somebody to learn from a guy like Smith for a year or two before he takes over? Is that even in the plans to pick somebody for the future. Maybe you pick a guy in the 5th round as opposed to the 1st round for quarterbacks to develop like a Kirk Cousins type thing. I mean, how different would things have been had they gone better for the Redskins last year if 6-3 became 10-6 instead of 7-9? You sit and you can drive yourself crazy thinking about these things too.
Yeah, you can go on and on, and injuries are very tough to predict. Impossible to predict, actually.
Right.
A lot of it is just like, you can't really say like, oh, I think there's going to be a lot of injuries for this team. It's really just kind of chaotic. You really can't predict it because, a lot of times it's like just taking the wrong step or an offensive lineman falling on your leg or something, or just pushing too hard on a play. It's very tough to kind of see how it would happen, and the Redskins have just gotten unlucky. And I think, at some point, maybe you can look at the training staff and be like, maybe we can make some changes. But, when it just keeps happening, and you can't stop that with a training staff. And it sucks because it takes some really good teams out of the equation. Like I know the Falcons a couple of years ago were a team, they were looking to get back to the playoffs, and injuries decimated their roster. Deion Jones, Keanu Neal, all going down. And the Redskins, the past 2 seasons, fans can look at it with their revisionist histories and say, hey, if this hadn't happened, we could have done this. But at the end of the day, you just got to move forward. I think it was for the best, honestly, because Alex Smith, as good as he is, serviceable, he commands respect, just a really great leader. I don't think they were winning anything with him. I don't. I think he's a passer who's kind of peaked a little bit, but again, a very respectable guy. But I don't know if they were winning anything with him. They might have gone 10-6, had an appearance in the wild card round, but I'm not sure he would have brought anything meaningful. At least with Dwayne Haskins, you have the potential to go farther, and you have the rookie contract window. Once Smith's contract gets off the books, you've got a ton of money where you can kind of go gangbusters in free agency and really capitalize and add to this home-built roster and really put it all together. So they've kind of created a window for themselves. It didn't happen in the best way, for some players. It was unfortunate in a lot of ways, but you make the most out of what you got, and that's all you can really say about it. And injuries, it's crazy how these injuries we talk about. It's volatile every year, but it can change the entire trajectory of a franchise. And we've seen that with the Redskins this year. So very interesting stuff. You just hope that it doesn't happen again, because then, it puts another wrench in your plans. And it's just, you'd like to think you're due for a good year, but you just can't tell.
Yeah. It's one of those things. You sit there and you think it can go potentially, and there's always that. Well, it's the NFL, and it happens every year. There's always that team that comes from out of nowhere. Why can't it be us? Why couldn't it be us? If we stay healthy, we finally get a break here and there. Why couldn't we go 10-6 and make a playoff run or something like that? It's not impossible. It happens all the time. So why couldn't it happen to the Redskins? We're in the NFC East, where we haven't had a repeat champion since 2004. So somebody different keeps winning the division. Why couldn't it be our turn this year? Why couldn't the Cowboys be the ones that have tons of injuries and suffer this year, and it's us who take their place on top and things like that? So, but as they say, everything happens for a reason. You guys went through what you had to go through to get to this point and get yourselves a guy like Haskins and things like that. Just like we as Bear fans would have loved not to go through Mark Trestman and John Fox, but it got us to Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace and Trubisky and Khalil Mack and those guys, where we're on the precipice of a Super Bowl run if all the things go right for us this year. So it's like we went through what we had to go through. We're happy where we are now. And like the Redskins, they've gone through what they've gone through, and they're happy with what they're looking at. They just need a few breaks this year. Yeah, for sure. And that's the toughest part, to be patient and let it all play out. But it's a necessary factor. You have to let it happen. And we'll see what happens if the injuries come back, or if the Skins finally get a break and are able to carry on that development without any snags. But a lot left unsettled for this team. Great potential, but ultimately
you still gotta put it out there, and you still gotta, put it into reality, put it into existence, and that's something that hasn't happened yet. And this has happened before, where it's been a team with good potential. It was a team with good potential last offseason, and they ended up 7-9. So you really gotta be careful not to jump the gun. And I think this team has a lot of upside, but even if it doesn't happen this year, maybe next year, the year after that. But you never can tell what's going to happen in the NFL. It's so unpredictable. So,
yeah, it's always fun to be a fan of that team where you can say something like, "I wouldn't be surprised if we went 4-12, but also I wouldn't be surprised if we went 12-4." Like the potential to go either way is there because of what we have on the roster, what we have in front of us with our schedule. And the fact that the NFL does churn out at least 2 or 3 new playoff teams on each side of the fence every single season. So it is definitely going to be interesting, and I'm curious to see how it all turns out for the Redskins. So, Ian, we got you week 3, so it won't be too long before we get a chance to talk to you again. Hope to have you back to preview that Monday night game between those two teams, see how those first 2 division games have gone for the Redskins. Has Keenum been starting the whole way, and Haskins going to start that home game against the Bears, or did Haskins takes the job in preseason, and how's the first few games gone? We'll get those questions answered when we see you, but where can we keep up with you in the meantime?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is at Ian_Cummings_9. The regular Ian Cummings 9 was taken, so I had to improvise a little bit. But you can look me up there. I'm usually tweeting about the Redskins, just football in general too. I follow all 32 teams, then The Office. So if you don't like The Office, you can steer clear. But it's a habit. It's a force of habit at this point. Got me through sophomore year of college a couple years ago. So that's fun. And then Riggo's Rag is just Riggo's Rag. A lot of G's in there, but it can be a tongue twister. But it's a callback to John Riggins, the Diesel back in the 80s. Yeah, you know it. So that's fun. You can view our content there. We'll probably have some schedule predictions up soon in the off season, I'd like to think, and maybe some hot takes about the Bears. You can check out my power rankings too. I recently had those up. I won't tell you where I put the Bears. You can look for yourself, but it's a spoiler warning. But it's a team with good potential. I'll play the flattery card a little bit here. So
sure. All right. Well, Ian, thanks so much for coming on the show. We look forward to having you back in, to preview week 3, man. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Remember, guys, Bears 100 for your 50% sign-up bonus on mybookie.ag, and ACAA is the promo code for $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. So there we go. 2 down, 2 to go with the NFC East. Up next, we got Brandon Lee Gouton, and actually he's an old friend. We've had him on the show a few times to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll have him on Tuesday to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, and we do talk about it. We talk about it. We pain over it. We get it out of the way, and we move on. And then after that, we'll move on to the Cowboys to wrap up the NFC East, which will lead us right into the NFC North, and our beloved Chicago Bears will be the 4th and final. And this time, for the first time, we won't be out of sequence when we do it. Because every year that we've done the opponent previews with guests, every single year that we were doing it, the Bears should have been the first show in the NFC North because we go worst to first. And this time, when we get to the Bears last, that's actually where they belong because they were the champs last year. How awesome is that? So all of our old friends will be back. Jeremy Reisman, Chris Gates, Evan Western from our various SB Nation representatives will be here to help preview those teams. And, of course, Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears and Pro Football Focus will be here to help us wrap up and preview our 2019 beloved Chicago Bears. So it's getting close. It is. I'm really having a great time with all of these, and I love doing this part of the show. This is the worst time of year as a football fan, but for me as a podcaster, it's my absolute favorite. So I absolutely love this. Been having a blast doing these interviews. So come back on Tuesday. Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation for the Philadelphia Eagles will be our next guest before we wrap it up with the Cowboys. So we'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, my name is Larry D, and this has been Bears Talk Underground.